If you're new to the channel, you know that, or if you're new to the channel, you don't know this. But we are going to be launching into our recap because we like to recap every episode of this long form content before we dive into actually discussing it. And if you find yourself on that recap video and you want to see our full discussion, it'll be linked down in the description box below. But yeah, without further ado, if you want to take us off here, my friend.
Yeah, so this was episode 51. The Apogee Solstice is the episode we've been waiting for a long time. And it did not disappoint. There's a lot of things that happened in this episode, so definitely bear with me as we cover everything. The episode, if you remember, the previous episode kind of ended with this conversation with the couple of Mighty Nine members with the ground team. And this episode actually opens up with the air team. And the air team, basically, we have FCG who casts Sending over to Orym and is basically like, what's going on? How are things happening? And Orym's like, yeah, we've met a couple of people. Like, there's a lot happening down here. And basically, the first part of this episode is Fern and FCG trying to decide should they abandon ship, so to speak, and get down to the ground team to help them if they might need them. But there's one sticky little issue, and that would mean leaving Ira with Captain Vandus. So they want to kind of size up. They want to size up Ira a little bit to make sure he's not like a murderous crazy person. And is like, hey, what's your 5-year plan? Like, what exactly do you do here? It's kind of the impression I got. And finally, what ends up happening is FCG decides to leave it to the Changebringer and decides to flip the coin. And heads as we stay, tails as we go. And sure enough, it's time to go. So they get dropped off and wish Captain Vandus well, who's kind of like, oh, you're leaving me with this guy. Great. And back down on the ground team, we do have another patrol come by, basically similar to one previously, where the party basically, there's going to be a lot of deception checks that are going to happen over the next couple hours of this episode. Ultimately, because the party is trying to push farther into the excavation site, and the excavation site is on high alert because they don't want this whole plan to get ruined. So they pass the deception check, sort of just explain, oh, the water's broken, we're just trying to get going, and ultimately that patrol moves on. Next up comes FCG and Fern, who are sort of like wading through the sandstorm, not really sure where they're going, and conveniently comes across our party. FCG actually decides to try to get inside of the warder and basically link up with the warder, and he is essentially ultimately successful and sort of, like robot Gundam style.
That's a good sound effect.
Thank you. Working on my DM voice. And basically takes control of the warder, and a bunch of the people like pile in. Orym climbs into the hand of the warder and like pretends that he is a prisoner, and those who are not inside the warder or being pretending to be captive are wearing their Paragon's Call or Ruby Vanguard outfit. The party then pushes farther into the excavation site. Once again, there will be a multitude of deception checks that are going to happen. They do come across an armored General Ratanish, who is sort of making his way through this excavation site as well. And we do get a cool little just RP moment from Orym, where he does his druid craft to conjure some red cherries or berries and smashes them on his face to look like he's injured. And again, there's a successful deception check, and Imogen basically lies and says that this is, an invader that they captured. And Ratanish says, oh, I almost feel sorry for the guy. That's, interesting. But all that to say, they push farther inside. Imogen is looking for her mother and does in fact see her mother, who's sort of floating and flying around, putting up sort of the last, with her telekinesis, is sort of attaching these last metal pieces to the Malleus Key, this massive device, far larger than what they saw in the Feywild, with massive power cores. And ultimately they decide to not talk with Liliana for now, but to push deeper into the base of this Malleus Key, which is where they find two large caverns. And in one of the caverns, one Adahan Thule walks into and begins chatting with some of the um, uh, cult members, to say the least,
Yeah.
on sort of like last decisions. And so the party, in good sense, decides to go to the other cavern, which once again has some power cells and things set up. And they start thinking about, okay, how can we basically blow this thing up? Like, what's the plan? There are a few guards who are in this room, and one of them asks. I think Matt even describes him as an exaltant. One of them even asks Imogen, like, what are you doing here? Like, what exactly is going on here?" They make a group deception check, and it seems like they may have done so successfully until, as the guards are sort of walking by them and leaving, the exaltant sends a message to Imogen that's basically like, let's see what you're made of. And then combat ensues. So it's actually a very quick round of combat. They take care of them extremely quickly. I think it's only one round or maybe the start of a second round.
Yeah, real quick.
And once they take them out, they do take one person prisoner. Chetney basically is like, hey, surrender. It's the last surviving person of the guards. Surrender, or you're going to be like one of them. And the soldier or the guard, whatever, is like, this isn't worth it. And you kind of get an impression that there are the exaltants and the rudest born people here, but then there's also the impression I got were that there's quite a few like hired hands, sort of like mercenaries who are here just sort of doing grunt work. And this is what this person essentially is. They pat down the bodies of the other guards and they find a locket of presumably a daughter of one of them. So the party kind of feels bad for for killing this bad guy. But basically they asked this prisoner, like, hey, how does all this stuff work? The prisoner's like, I really have no idea. I just know that the big crazy man, the old guy, wants to basically, do this big plan. That's kind of all I know. So as they're chatting, they also, Lawton is looking at the scribe ball and begins to notice that Adahan is moving. FCG, who's been keeping guard outside of this cavern, and pretending like to move stuff and look busy, sees Adahan finishing in that cavern and now moving over to their cavern to basically inspect that one as well. There's a lot of panic and we go to break. So that's the first half. You want to take it from there?
All right. Yeah. Good job. All right. A lot happens in this second half, so y'all bear with me. But we pick back up with basically everyone knowing that Adahan is now on the way, thanks to FCG conveying the information. And the group tries to kind of tidy up after this battle, and most of them try and hide. This is when Matt has Liam and Marisha roll for Bo and Caleb, and they get a natural 13 and a natural 7, respectively. So not the greatest. Odahan then is like turning the corner to come down into this chamber when there is an explosion, and 2 of the machines emitting this like dispel magic cone have like detonated, presumably thanks to whatever Bo and Caleb are doing. Excuse me. This distracts Odahan, who goes and investigates, but Imogen kind of still just takes her shot here because even though Odahan is not like within sight range, she is still within her psychic lance's attack range, and so she does it. And it hits, like Odahan fails the save or whatever, but she does use a legendary resistance on it. So she does take some damage and she does look around, but she can't see where it came from. So she like continues on toward the distraction. The party thinks, okay, with this going on, this is our time to move. And so FCG sends a message to Ira telling him to launch the airstrike with the airship. The party in the chamber does attack some of these cables and arcane cores, causing some of them to detonate as well. But back in the main chamber, FCG, again, still in the body of this warder, makes their way to Rin's statue. And he's kind of in the central chamber now, where both Liliana and Ludinus are. So FCG is like, okay, I'm going to try to sneakily grab Rin's statue here, but meanwhile, I'm going to pretend like I'm helping pick up debris from like this explosion that just happened. And I think he rolls poorly. I don't remember if it was like a
Yeah,
natural one.
it was bad.
Um, I think it
There's
was
a
a
lot of
natural
bad
one though.
rolls in
Yeah.
this. When it matters, terrible rolls.
So as he's pretending to pick up this chunk of debris, he actually like kind of stumbles into it and knocks this whole wall over onto the Rin
Yeah.
statue, which we later come to find out that this has caused her arm to break off. Um, everyone kind of turns and looks, and FCG barely makes the deception check necessary, and everyone just assumes like it's this stupid robot, and Ludinus just like deactivates it, for like basically trapping FCG inside. So back to the main group. They're approached by more members of like the guard checking on things, but again, everyone's in disguises, and so they are able to successfully do a group deception check and kind of move past this. The party then exits the chamber, and they all hear a voice in their head simultaneously, and it's Ludinus. He's basically launching into this big speech that he's going to be giving for the next large chunk of the episode. And he basically says the timetable's been moved forward. I need everyone to come gather at the key. We then have Matt ask for another Liam and Marisha roll for Bo and Caleb, and we get a 6 and a 5, respectively. So continuing the really bad rolls. That's when they see Liliana and this mage hunter golem basically like descending down, and in the golem's hand, he is clutching Caleb like by the neck. Also, Beauregard is making her way, like walking down toward the Malleus key from higher up in the chamber, and she is seemingly being controlled by Liliana, who's like outstanding a hand toward her. Ludinus speaks again and is thanking everyone for joining him, including Caleb and Bo, who he says, like, you've been a thorn in my side for years. How fitting that you will now have front row seats to your own failure. When Bo reaches down in the main chamber, they shackle her like up to the nines completely and chain her up. And again, Caleb is just being grasped by this mage hunter golem. And he also has a collar around his neck, which is like preventing him from casting magic. Ludinus then puts one of his arms into this machine, and it basically like starts powering up and lights up, and he fuels it with his own arcana. Liliana then parts her arms, which causes these like two plates, these armored plates on the machine to drop down, and we see that there is a dodecahedron in this Malleus key, like partially powering it as well. Ludinus then says it's time, and this like energy fills the chamber and locks everyone in place. And in the night sky above, the stars all start to like pass by, and hours seem to go by in seconds until Ruidus is kind of like held aloft in a way above the Malleus key. Ludinus then removes his hand from the device, and it's all like dark and withered now.
Yeah.
It's at this time that suddenly the airship appears above the key and starts plummeting down. Ludinus throws up a wall of force surrounding the Malleus key, and the airship just shatters against it, sending debris, fire, and basically chaos just all over below, killing tons of these vanguards and paragons call people that have gathered here in Ruidusborns. Ira and Xandus, however, did manage to dimension door out in time, as Laudna kind of can see them up higher in the excavation site. And she messages Ira and kind of quickly catches him up, saying, like, we destroyed one of the things. Like, what do you think? Can you destroy something? And Ira's like, I'll see what I can do. In the chaos below, Liliana casts like a mass calm emotions, essentially, basically chilling everyone out, and everyone like again turns to look at Ludinus, who is continuing his speech about the gods and, you know, kind of what they're doing here. Meanwhile, Imogen casts command, continuing her streak of like MVP command moves this campaign on the Mage Hunter Golem to release Caleb, which it does, but again, Caleb does have this like spell collar around his neck, preventing him from doing anything really. Orem makes his way toward FCG to try to help him get out of this now deactivated order that he's in, while Laudna and Ashton go to yet another set of power cores to try to destroy them. Chetney, meanwhile, goes invisible, and he is going to start to try to climb up this Malleus key, but he's failing at first because this is like a very difficult endeavor. Orem gets to FCG, helps FCG escape, but Liliana notices this happening and is about to like cast something when Imogen messages her mother and is like, "Mom," and basically tries to, talk her out of this. She's like, "It doesn't have to be this way." Like, and they have a brief conversation
Right.
with Imogen basically saying like, "How can you trust him?" And she says, "I just do." And then a rumble happens, and we're told that Ira has detonated yet another like set of cores and power supplies. Liliana sees him kind of darting out of this chamber, and she banishes him. So he's poof gone
Yeah.
back to the Feywild. Um, Ludinus continues his speech saying,
Maybe for good, by the way. We don't know.
well, yeah, more on that in a second.
Yeah.
Ludinus continues his speech saying, "I've worked selflessly for 1,000 years. Let me be your villain if it means your liberation forever." Laudna and Ashton detonate some more cores where they are, and like the residuum energy flowing into the Malleus key dulls a little bit. Then Ludinus says to the Ruidus Borns, like, "All right, it's time." And they all start to glow with like this red mist energy like flowing off of them, seemingly like empowering the device as well. Suddenly, the wind kicks up and a large boulder slams down in front of the Malleus key, and it is Keyleth in her earth elemental form. And she says, like, "By the Tempest, like, you must stop this." Ludinus looks down and says, "Right on time." And he casts Power Word Stun on her. And it's at this point that Odahan jumps out of the shadows and uses her shadow clones essentially to all surround Keyleth, who again is stunned. And she just starts wailing on her. Everyone that's around rolls initiative because they want to obviously help, but Odahan has the highest of these initiatives, and so she goes first. All of her attacks are with advantage because of the stun, and with her first attack, she knocks Keyleth prone, which then makes all the rest of her attacks do even more damage.
This
So
is
I think,
fine.
I think she gets
No big
5
deal.
attacks amongst her and her clones, 2 of which are nat 20s, and then she action surges and does it all again. Um, and so she cleaves through the elemental form, goes through all of that HP. So Keyleth drops back to her normal form, and she's now cutting Keyleth like to ribbons. And as she goes for the heart strike, Matt describes this blur of shadows and feathers, and the blow is deflected. And then there before her is a masked figure saying, "Don't you dare." And the champion of ravens has showed up to protect her. Um, During this, FCG tries to dispel the collar on Caleb's neck, but it doesn't work. Orem jumps off the warder where he was helping FCG and just unleashes his attacks into Odahan's backpack, which we found out is what's causing her shadow clones. And it has a super high AC of 25. He is able to get some hits, but it's just not enough damage to fully destroy it. So basically, the rest of Bell's Hells are like, let's finish this. But with such a high AC, they're all missing the backpack. Chetney, however, does go for Ludinus instead, but he's like swatted away essentially, and he actually gets impaled on a piece of the Malleus key. Um, Liliana, meanwhile, is actually holding her actions, being kind of torn because of Imogen being there and talking to her. So she's actually not really doing anything right now. Ludinus looks down at everyone and and smiles, and he's like, "Ah, the final piece, a sliver of divinity, the lens." And he snaps, and Liliana then casts a spell towards the champion of ravens, and all the mirrors around the excavation site like turn in, and this energy like all directs onto him and turns him into like this black orb, which she then like floats up and places into the Malleus key. Um, Ludinus says that the machine hasn't gotten quite enough power, but this will have to do. And as he's saying this, more airships start to appear overhead, presumably from Vasselheim. And they're just, excuse me, the Ruidusborn's energy again is still like flowing off of them and filtering in. And Ludinus says, "Let us destroy what will unmake them." And this enormous beam of energy shoots out of the key, flying up into the sky toward Ruidus, and just the pure force of it like blows back all of these airships. And Ludinus screams, "For 1,000 years you couldn't stop me, and now it's too late." And he's just laughing as all like the Nexus energy and the Leyline
Mhm.
energy is tethering together, and the sky goes from pitch black to like red and white, to finally white. Excuse me. And when this white This subsides. Ladna finds herself on the edge of a cliff with like this sulfurous smell hitting her nose and pools of strange liquid around, and she's in an unfamiliar landscape. She can see Ashton nearby and Orim. None of them are hurt, and in the far distance, they can still see Ruidus with the red beam of light emanating around it or toward it. We then cut to the rest of the party, who all find themselves in this like crystal sand, like snow. They cannot see Ruidus or Katha in the sky above, just stars. And Chetty recognizes where they are as the Crystal Sands tundra, which is near his hometown of Uthadern, half a
What?
world away.
What?
And that's where the episode ends.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, that's our recap. If you're watching just the recap, click the link. We're going to be talking about this. You're going to want to talk about it too. So click the link to our full video. Will, what the heck?
What the heck, man?